The sun bleeds red over Sagewater, a frontier town carved from dust and defiance, where the wind howls like a preacher, damning sinners to hell. Dust swirls stinging eyes as if the land demands blood for every breath. Crooked saloon doors creak. The general store's faded sign swings like a noose, and townsfolk scurry heads bowed, dodging the weight of the sky. It's late spring, but the air bites sharp as a spur, reminding all that the West forgives no one. Lucy Harris, 30, stands on the store's splintered porch, her broad frame straining a patched gray dress that pinches her ribs, her hands calloused as rawhide from years of scrubbing floors, hauling grain, and cooking for a family that barely feeds her clutch, a burlap sack of flour and beans. Sweat beads on her brow, not from heat, but from the sting of whispers. Too big, too plain, too single. Sagewater's unforgivable sin. Her stepmother Mildred sells her labor to ranchers for nickels, pocketing every coin. Her cousins Ella and Beth mock her, calling her face a hog's curse and her body a load no man'd carry. The town nods, their eyes sharp as knives. A gaggle of women pass, bonnets swaying like vultures circling carrion. Their voices slice through the dust. Haulin' like a mule again. Ain't no man touching that one, sneers her voice barbed wire. Her ma tried bribing a drifter to take her. Didn't stick, another laughs cruel as a whip's crack. Lucy keeps her eyes on the dirt boots scuffing the road. She's heard it all, years of toil under Mildred's thumb, scrubbing pots till her knuckles bled, hauling sacks till her shoulders screamed, cooking meals she wasn't allowed to taste. Mildred's words haunt her. You're built for work, girl, not love. The sack feels heavier than flour, its shame packed tight, crushing her with every step toward the crumbling shack she calls home, a husk of peeling paint and sagging boards, a relic of her late parents. Her mother lost to fever, her father to whiskey and debt. 3 miles out, past tangled sagebrush and windmills creaking like old bones, a gray stallion. Shadow paws the earth, the rider Jacob Vance. 35 sits tall, his silhouette sharp against the bruised sky. Lean, sundark, with eyes like slate and a jaw carved from the red cliffs beyond. He owns half the county, but never boasts. His wealth is a whisper, his past a shadow no one dares probe. He doesn't drink whiskey, doesn't chase women, doesn't bow to gossip, but he watches, his gaze steady as a rifle. From a hill overlooking Sagewater, Jacob sees Lucy stumble under her load, sees the townsfolk turn away, sees the dust settle around her like a shroud. His eyes narrow, not with pity, but with recognition, a weight he's carried too in a different life. He nudges Shadow forward, slow, deliberate, a man who's already decided something, his boots leaving soft prints in the dust. By a cracked window in her shack, moonlight softens Lucy's shadow. She sits at a wobbly table, folding a letter she'll never send, her hands trembling from hauling crates for a rancher who paid Mildred instead of her. The paper is worn, her words scratched in pencil, barely legible. Dear stranger, I ain't much to look at, but I'm steady. Find that if you're real, she whispers, her voice a ghost in the dark. She tucks the letter under a chipped mug, blows out the candle. Mildred's snores rattle through the thin walls, a reminder of Lucy's prison, endless labor, no kindness, no escape. Ella and Beth's laughter from the next room cuts deeper than the blisters on her hands, their voices mocking her weight, her face, her loneliness. She closes her eyes, but sleep stays distant like a star, too far to touch. Church bells clang like a summons to judgment. Lucy wears her only good dress, a faded brown thing her mother sewed years ago. It strains across her chest, buttons fighting to hold. She sits in the back pew alone, eyes fixed on the scuffed floorboards. Whispers slither through the congregation, sharp as thorns. Lord. She takes up half the bench. One woman mutters, her voice low but venomous. No man's desperate enough for that. Another says, pity dripping like poison. Lucy slips out before the final hymn, her shawl tight around her shoulders, shielding her from the stairs. Outside, Jacob leans against a black wagon, its steel wheels gleaming like a predator's eyes in the morning light. He tips his hat, a slow, deliberate gesture. Morning. Fine dress you got on, he says, voice low, steady as a heartbeat. Lucy freezes, glances behind her, sure he means someone else. Her cheeks burn under the weight of his gaze. Ain't nobody said that, before she mumbles, barely audible. They're blind then, he replies, his eyes holding hers for a moment too long. He walks off, boots kicking up dust that dances in the sunlight. Lucy stares after him, her chest tight, not with fear, but with something new, a crack in the wall she's built to keep the world out. She walks home, his words heavier than the sack she carries, her heart stirring with a feeling she can't name. 5 days later, Jacob leans against a stack of feed sacks inside the general store, watching Lucy wrestle a crate of apples. The bell jingles as she enters, and the room falls silent, every eye on her except his. He looks at her like she belongs, like the crate in her arms is a crown, not a curse. Mildred's voice echoes, "You're too ugly to be seen, Lucy," but she pushes it down, gripping the crate tighter. "Need a hand?" Jacob asks, his voice calm, no trace of pity. "I managed," she says, cheeks burning, her voice sharper than she meant. He nods, doesn't push, just stays, his presence a shadow that doesn't judge. She hefts the crate to the counter, her arms trembling from the weight, but she doesn't falter. As she leaves, she feels his eyes, not mocking, not cruel, but steady, like he sees something she can't, something worth seeing. A storm rolls in from the north, mean and wild, snapping branches and tearing laundry from lines. Lucy's halfway home, the arms full of jars and a loaf of bread wrapped in wax paper. The wind hits like a fist dust, blinding her shawl whipping away into the dark. The bag tears, glass shatters, pickles and molasses bleeding into the dirt. She drops to her knees, scrambling to save what she can. Hands shaking, breath hitching. Mildred will beat her for this call, her careless dock, her supper for a week. The wind howls and Lucy feels it laughing at her, mocking her clumsy hands, her heavy frame. Bootsteps crunch behind her, slow and steady. Jacob kneels silent, picking up a dented jar from the dirt. His coat is open, sleeves rolled, hat shielding his eyes from the storm's wrath. "I'm fine," she snaps, tears mixing with dust on her face, her voice raw with shame. "Didn't ask," he says, not unkindly, holding out the jar. Their fingers brush as she takes it, and something stirs in her chest like a bird waking in a cage. It's not fear, not shame, but a memory of something she thought she'd lost, hope maybe, or the idea that someone could see her without flinching. He gathers the unbroken jars, carries them without a word. They walk to her shack, the storm raging around them, but his presence is a calm she can't explain. At her gate, he pauses, looking at the sagging fence, its posts splintered like broken promises. "I'll fix that," he says, nodding at the fence. "It ain't broke," she says, voice stubborn, defiant. "Not yet," he replies, a faint smile tugging at his lips. 2 days later, the fence's new sturdy posts, clean rails, a gate that swings silent. His name, Vance, is carved small in the wood, almost hidden. Lucy touches it, tracing the letters with a calloused finger. And for the first time in years, she smiles without shame, without apology. She doesn't tell Mildred, doesn't tell anyone. This is hers, a secret she keeps close like the letter under the mug. Lucy wears the brown dress to church, lets the whispers slide off her like rain on a tin roof. Jacob's there, leaning against his wagon, his steady gaze waiting for her. She nods first this time, a small act of courage. He falls into step beside her, his boots matching her pace, their rhythm, a quiet rebellion against the town's judgment. "They're talking," she says, voice low, testing him. "Always do. It's what they stop saying that counts," he says, his voice like gravel smoothed by a river. They walk in silence, comfortable like a habit they've always had. The town feels smaller, the whispers less sharp with him beside her. She feels lighter, not in body but in spirit, like she's shedding a weight she didn't know she carried. "Can I show you something?" he asks, stopping by the road, his eyes searching hers. Where she says, wary, her heart thumping. "Red Hollow, Wild Orchard, you seen it?" She shakes her head, her breath catching. "It's quiet, you'd like it. I don't go places with strangers. You know my name." "That ain't enough." "You scare." "Yes." "Good. Means you got something to lose." She looks at him, really looks. His eyes steady as the horizon. She nods, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tomorrow, then." Lucy packs a basket, bread she baked at dawn, cold chicken, 2 jars of cider wrapped in cloth to keep cool. She brushes her hair. Not for him, for her, a rebellion against Mildred's rules that she stay unseen, unworthy. Jacob's wagon pulls up dustless, proud, its steel wheels gleaming in the morning light. She climbs in, feeling like she fits, like the seat was made for her. The orchard at Red Hollow is a tangle of apple trees, heavy with fruit nobody claims. They sit by a pond, a turtle blinking slow on a rock. Jacob doesn't speak, lets her choose the silence. She unpacks the basket, hands him a piece of bread. He takes it, nods, and they eat, the only sound the rustle of leaves and the soft lap of water. After the meal, she breaks the quiet, her voice trembling. "Why me?" He leans back, looks at the sky, his hat tilted low. "Everyone else sees a problem. I see a woman who holds her own. Nobody said that before, she says, her throat tight, her eyes stinging. They're fools then, he replies, his voice steady. Sure. She looks at the pond, the turtle, the sky, anywhere but him. Her heart feels too big for her chest, like it might break through the seams of her dress, but she doesn't cry, not yet. Back in Sagewater, the whispers grow, claws sharp and hungry. What's Vance doing with her must be a bet. She's fooling herself. But Lucy doesn't care. Not like she used to. Not after he called her steady as strength. They meet often now, away from town, by her fence in the orchard, under stars that don't judge. He brings gifts, a book of poetry, bound in leather, its pages soft as whispers. A carved wooden bird with wings spread wing. Gloves that fit her hands like they were measured in secret. She never asks why. He never explains. Each gift feels like a promise, not of love, but of seeing her, really seeing her beyond the town's cruel lens. A letter arrives, delivered by a boy from the mayor's office, sealed with wax and smelling of ink. Sagewater's Harvest Jubilee needs a judge for the bread contest, and Lucy's name is on the list. She reads it twice, 3 times. Sure, it's a joke, a cruel trick to make her the town's laughingstock, to parade her for sport. Lucy sits on her porch, the letter crumpled in her lap. Jacob finds her there, his shadow falling soft across the boards, his presence steady as ever. They're mocking me, she says, voice bitter, her fingers tight around the paper. Maybe, he says, leaning against the railing. But you make bread that could hush a saloon? Go. What if they laugh? Then I'll stand there and laugh with you. You're not like them, she says, almost a whisper. Wasn't always, he says, his eyes distant. Used to be the kid they spit on. Money just changed the story. The Jubilee is a riot of color banners flapping in the wind, fiddles wailing, kids with faces sticky from jam. Lucy wears a new dress, blue as a dusk sky sewn by her own hands over sleepless nights. Every stitch is a prayer, every seam a defiance against Mildred's voice in her head. Jacob offers his arm, his eyes warm, steady. She takes it, her heart pounding like a drum. The crowd parts, stunned, their whispers faltering. At the bread table, she tastes every loaf, her hands steady, her smile soft but sure. She names the winner Lila 16 with a rye loaf that tastes like home, warm and honest. The crowd claps, not out of pity, but respect, their hands slapping together like a storm breaking. Lucy feels it, the shift, like the earth tilting under her feet, a crack in the town's judgment. On the courthouse steps, Jacob hands her a cider, the glass cool against her palm. You were a force, he says, his voice low, proud. I was terrified, she says, her voice honest, her eyes meeting his. That's why it matters, he replies, his smile small, but real, like a secret shared. 3 weeks later, the sun burns hot, pressing down on Sagewater like a judgment. Lucy's garden thrives, roses, sage, a patch of mint that fights the dust and wins. The town still whispers, but some voices soften, hesitant, like they're testing new words. She's got grit. Vance has got taste. Then a rider comes, a woman named Isabel Drake, sharp as a blade, dressed in black, her horse, Midnight, gleaming like oil in the sunlight. From Jacob. I'm Isabel, she says, handing Lucy a letter, her smile thin as a knife's edge. Who are you to him? Lucy asks, her heart sinking, her fingers tight on the paper. Someone who used to matter, Isabel says, mounting her horse and riding off, dust trailing like a warning. The letter invites Lucy to the Ironwood Gala, a gathering of wealth and power at Jacob's estate. I'd like you there if you want to come. Jacob. She reads it 3 times, her hands trembling, not sure if it's fear or hope, her mind racing with doubt. Lucy wears a gray gown, simple, but hers sewn over 3 sleepless nights, her fingers pricked raw from the needle. Jacob arrives at sundown, his eyes warm, his presence steady as the cliffs beyond. You look right, he says, and she believes him, her heart stuttering. The Ironwood estate glows like a fever dream, lanterns casting shadows, violins, weeping silk dresses swirling like smoke. Isabel stands across the ballroom, wineglass in hand, watching Lucy like a hawk watches a sparrow. Later by the fountain, Isabel approaches, her boots clicking on the stone, her voice smooth but sharp. Nice dress. You make it. Yes, Lucy replies, meeting her gaze, her voice steady. Cute. You and Jacob serious? That's his business. Isabel sips her wine, her smile cutting. We were engaged once. He didn't tell you? He tells me what matters, Lucy says, her voice unwavering. Isabel laughs soft like a blade sliding from its sheath. He's a dreamer, Lucy. Dreamers don't stay. I'm not here to chase him, Lucy says. I'm here to stand still. Isabel tilts her head, says nothing, and walks away. Her shadow long and cold, leaving Lucy alone by the fountain, her heart pounding, but her feet rooted. A dead crow lies on Lucy's porch, its throat cut, blood pooling on the boards. No note, just a warning. She buries it under the mint, her hands shaking, but she doesn't tell Jacob, not wanting to burden him. 2 days later, a letter's pinned to the church door, sealed with the mayor's wax. The town council wants Lucy to speak at the assembly, honoring her contribution. She laughs bitter, sure it's another trap to mock her, to parade her for sport. "I ain't contributed nothing," she says to Jacob. The letter crumpled in her fist. "You showed up," he says, his voice calm, his eyes steady. "That's more than most." She writes a speech, burns it, writes another, then another, her hands stained with ink and doubt. By Friday, she's ready to quit, her heart heavy with fear. Then she finds her old letter tucked under the mug. "Find my steady." She holds it close like a talisman and keeps writing, her words growing stronger with each draft. The assembly is a sea of faces, lanterns flickering like eyes in the dark. Lucy steps to the podium, her heart pounding, her voice soft but sure, cutting through the silence. "I know what you see. Too big, too plain, too alone. I thought I had to shrink to fit. But someone told me my steady's enough, and I believe him." The crowd is silent, then roars, hands clapping like thunder breaking over the plains. Lucy steps down, her legs trembling, but her head high, her heart full. That night, chaos erupts. A barn behind the schoolhouse catches fire, flames licking the sky like tongues of judgment. Words are scrawled in ash across the charred wood. "Ugly girls don't belong." Jacob leads the charge, barking orders, hauling water with a fury that makes men step back. Lucy joins him, her dress black with soot, her hands raw from passing buckets. They save the barn, but the words burn into her mind, sharper than the flames, cutting deeper than Mildred's taunts. The crowd disperses, coughing, staring, but no one meets her eyes, their shame a weight they can't carry. Women come to Lucy's porch, wives, mothers. Lila with her rye bread. "We were wrong," one says, holding out a loaf still warm from the oven. Lucy takes it, her hands steady, but she doesn't invite them in. She's not ready to forgive, not yet. That night, Jacob's quiet, his eyes dark with something unspoken, his jaw tight. "They meant to scare you," he says, his voice low, heavy with anger. "They did," she says, honest, her voice trembling. "But I ain't running." "Good," he says, squeezing her hand, his calluses rough against her own, a tether in the storm. A letter arrives from the state, asking Lucy to speak at the Capitol about women's rights in Sagewater. She freezes the paper, trembling in her hands, her heart racing with doubt. "I ain't nobody," she says, her voice small, almost lost. "You're the woman who stood in fire and didn't flinch." Jacob says, his eyes steady, his voice a rock she can lean on. The train ride is long, the Capitol pointed its streets hard and gray, unfamiliar. Lucy shares a car with Ruth, a widow with a laugh like a cracked bell, who tells stories of loss and survival. Her words weaving a thread of strength. At the assembly, Lucy stands in a hall taller than any church. Her voice soft but growing stronger, each word a step toward courage. "I wasn't born to speak. I was born heavy, and to some that's a crime. But I learned heavy can hold ground." The crowd stands, some weep, one man shouts, "Run for mayor!" Lucy smiles, but her heart aches hollow. Jacob hasn't written, not once. She checks for letters at every station, but there's nothing, and the silence feels heavier than any sack she's ever carried, heavier than the town's judgment. Jacob sits in his barn, staring at a letter he can't send. "I love you" is scratched on the page, the words too big, too raw, his hand trembling as he writes. Isabel finds him, her boots silent on the straw, her presence a reminder of a past he's left behind. "You miss her?" she asks, leaning against the stall, her voice softer than before. "Yes," he says, not looking up, his eyes fixed on the letter. "She's too good for this dust," Isabel says, her tone almost kind. "She's what this dust needs," he says, his voice sharp, cutting through the quiet. Isabel nods, says nothing, and leaves her shadow lingering like a warning, like a ghost he can't shake. Lucy returns to Sagewater, her suitcase light, her heart heavy. No one meets her at the station, the platform empty, except for the wind whistling like it's mocking her. The next morning, a package waits on her porch, gloves, soft her size, no note. She knows it's him, her heart quickening. She finds Jacob in the orchard, sitting by the pond, the turtle still blinking, slow its calm, a contrast to her storm. Their eyes meet, no words at first, the air thick with unspoken things. "I missed you," she says, her voice breaking raw with truth. "Lucy." "I love you," he says, his voice rough, like he's been holding the words too long, afraid they'd break him. She leans into him, her head against his chest, his heartbeat steady under her cheek, a rhythm she could live by. I knew, she says, her voice soft but sure. I just needed you to know it too. Spring comes early, petals falling like snow in the orchard, soft and fleeting. Sagewater shifts slow but real, like a river carving new paths. The saloon starts a free meal day. No questions asked, a small gesture of change. The school hires a teacher. Lucy suggested a woman who doesn't flinch at hard truths, who sees girls like Lucy and calls them enough. The whispers turn to nods, some to smiles, hesitant but growing. Then trouble rides in Victor Hale, rich, loud smelling of city money and ambition. He wants Jacob's land claims. The water rights were never his, waving papers signed by men in suits who've never seen Sagewater's dust. It's mine, Jacob says to Lucy over supper, his jaw tight, his eyes dark with resolve. Worked it, bled for, it paid every tax. Then we fight, she says, her voice steady, her hand reaching for his across the table. Hale moves fast, buying out neighbors with loans. They can't repay his men lurking at the edges of town like wolves. He offers Lucy a job as a symbol for his campaign to clean up Sagewater, his smile oily, his words slick. She laughs in his face, her voice ringing across the saloon, clear and unyielding. I ain't your banner, she says, and walks out head high, the crowd parting like she's a force they can't reckon with. Threats follow dead rabbits on her porch, their fur matted with blood. Notes calling her a fraud, a nobody riding Jacob's wealth. She burns them in the fire, doesn't tell. Jacob doesn't want to be a burden. But the weight grows heavier than any sack she's carried, heavier than Mildred's cruelty. A storm rages the sky, electric wind howling like it wants to tear the world apart. Lucy stands on her porch, barefoot in the mud, screaming into the gale. Not words, just pain, raw and wild, a cry for every time she was called less than human. Jacob hears it from his barn, runs through the rain, finds her soaked, shaking her hair plastered to her face, her eyes wild with grief. Why do they hate me? She asked, her voice breaking, her hands clenched into fists. They don't, he says, grabbing her shoulders, his voice steady despite the storm. They hate what you make them, see their own cowardice, their own smallness. They stand holding each other like anchors in a flood, the rain washing the dust from their skin, their clothes heavy, but their hearts lighter bound together. The town grows colder, not in weather, but in spirit. Gardens wilt, shutters stay closed, children stop waving, fear settling like dust. Hale's men circle their shadows long in the dusk, their eyes hard. Jacob faces a choice fight in court, risking everything, land, wealth, future, or sell the disputed land and keep what he can, a safer but smaller life. Which keeps you honest? Lucy asks, stirring stew, her eyes on him, searching. Fighting, he says, his voice like iron unyielding. Then fight, she says, and he nods her strength, anchoring his own, their hands clasped across the table. A letter's nailed to the saloon door accusing Lucy of scheming, of using Jacob's wealth to buy her way into respect. It calls her a mule in a dress, a joke who cried her way to a podium. The crowd gasps as the preacher tears it down, his hands trembling with shame. Lucy hears about it hours later and laughs, but it's not joy. It's disbelief laced with grief, a wound that won't close. She packs a bag, just one no note, and starts walking the orchard, her only refuge, the trees, her only witnesses. Jacob finds her under the apple trees, moonlight casting shadows too long for comfort, her face wet with tears. You're running, he asks, his voice soft but firm, his boots planted in the dirt. I'm tired, she says, her voice breaking raw with exhaustion. Tired of proving I belong. Then stop proving, he says, stepping in front of her, his eyes fierce with love. Start living. She drops the bag, cries into his chest, her sobs shaking the branches above the orchard, holding them like a sanctuary. He doesn't promise it'll get better. He promises she won't face it alone, his arms steady around her. Isabel rides into town, dusty, worn, no silk this time, her horse weary. She finds Jacob in the saloon nursing coffee, not whiskey, his eyes distant. Hale's done, she says, her voice flat. Arrested in Red Bluff for fraud. State's investigating his claims. Your land's safe for now. Jacob nods, says nothing, his jaw tight. Isabel looks at him, her eyes softer than before, almost regretful. She's what this place needs, she says, her voice low. Don't lose her. I won't, he says, and she leaves her horse fading into the dust, her shadow gone by dawn. Sagewater exhales the air lighter, the dust settling. The council apologizes in print. Front page bold, their words clumsy but honest. Women bring flowers to Lucy's porch, their eyes downcast, their hands trembling with guilt. She doesn't celebrate, doesn't gloat. She plants her hands steady in the dirt, forgiving the soil, if not the town, her roses blooming brighter than ever. The preacher knocks on her door, hat in hand, shame in his eyes, his voice soft. "The ladies' auxiliary wants you to speak at next month's jubilee," he says. "Would they want me? If I was nothing?" She asks, her voice calm, her eyes searching his. "Yes," he says, after a pause, his voice honest. "I'll think about it," she says, closing the door softly, her heart steady. That night, she tells Jacob, her voice quiet but sure, "I want to build something. A school for girls like me, girls who get laughed at, who get told they're too much or not enough." "You sure?" he asks, his eyes searching hers, his hand resting on the table between them. "I ain't scared," she says, and he smiles, the kind that makes her feel seen fully for the first time. The foundation is laid. Volunteers come 3 at first, then 12, then more, their hands eager to build something new. Jacob builds the door himself, carving words into the wood. "Stay steady." On opening day, Lucy stands in a simple gray dress, no corset, no frills, just truth. She cuts the ribbon, her heart full. The crowd quiet but present, girls, mothers, men who used to laugh, the mayor with his hat in hand, his eyes downcast. "I forgave this town," she says to Jacob, her voice soft, her hand in his. "You saved it," he says, his hand squeezing hers, his voice thick with pride. A publisher writes wanting her speeches in a book, a collection of her words to reach beyond Sagewater. She hesitates, then says yes, thinking of every girl who still whispers to herself in the dark, who writes letters to strangers they hope are real. The question isn't if she loves Jacob, she does with every worn piece of her heart. The question is if she can let herself be loved fully, without earning it, without proving she's enough. She finds him by his fire, reading his boots off his flannel, soft with age, the room warm with the scent of cedar. "Do you want me?" she asks, her voice steady, her eyes locked on his. "Always," he says, closing the book, his eyes wet, his voice rough with truth. "I love you, Jacob," she says, the words new but true, like a vow she's always known. "Lucy Harris." "I want all of you," loud, quiet, broken whole, he says, standing, his hands reaching for hers. They marry in the orchard, no preacher, no crowd, just them, and the trees, the turtle watching from its rock. They write vows in the dirt with sticks, simple and true. "I'll show up," he says. "I'll take up space," she says. They kiss, and the branches above them shake like the trees are clapping the wind, carrying their promise across the plains. Years pass slow and steady like the rhythm of their lives. The school grows, a second building, a dorm, a scholarship fund started by anonymous donors, though Lucy suspects Jacob's quiet hand. Sagewater changes not with fanfare, but with small, honest things like seeds taking root. The saloon keeps its free meal day, feeding anyone who walks through the door. The school prints newsletters with quotes from girls who sound like Lucy, their voices bold on the page. A boy named Eli, whose sister once mocked her, stands outside her classroom every morning to say, "Thank you," his voice shy but sure. The world isn't perfect, but it's honest, and that's enough for Lucy, enough for the life she's built. Lucy and Jacob sit on her porch, fireflies blinking in the dusk, their light soft against the darkening sky. He rocks gently in the chair beside her head resting on his shoulder, their hands entwined. "Regret anything?" he asks, his voice low, a question born of years together. "Only not loving myself sooner," she says, her voice steady, her eyes on the horizon. "But I had to be hated a little first to know how strong I could love back." He kisses her temple, his lips warm against her skin. "You changed this place." "I changed me," she says, her voice soft but sure, a truth she's earned. The place followed.